Welcome back, everybody, to the Diary of the Landscaper. We'll welcome back Tom Glenn. He's a irrigation tech guy, and we're going to talk about troubleshootings and irrigation, fire location, and all those things. Tom, remind people who's listening again who you are and what you do.
So I'm the irrigation manager here at Creekside. We are in the Twin Cities, Minnesota. I've been doing irrigation for this will be my 20th season now. I have cut a lot of teeth into a lot of the electrical and, wire troubleshooting out there, which seems to be a harder topic, but like the more you get into the irrigation game, the more those repairs become available and they're quite profitable when you can be good at it and get a lot of them on your plate to do.
Thank you. So yeah, we're gonna start with the problem topic questions. So, what do you think most small business avoid building systems to identify those issues? Like instead of offering the service, they just either put a battery operation or battery operated controller, or they just don't do the service. What do you think?
I think I think it's closing, but I think there was a much bigger gap in the training out there to get a lot of this training to gain these skills, to know how to use the tools, to know how to effectively use the tools in the field to solve the problem. I think scheduling certainly plays into effect some of it, where it is much faster for some guys to throw in one of those battery operated nodes instead of, getting down and dirty and grabbing a tracer and taking the time to go through the system and actually fix the issue for the customer. I think sometimes it's a lot easier to throw a band-aid on it and then ignore it. I get a lot of those on my plate because, once a customer finds out, oh, it wasn't really repaired correctly the first time, then they're looking to get it fixed after that. And it can be a bit of a mess following after that. But yeah, I think the lack of the training and how to use the tools. I also think that some of the lack in the training is because these tools are very, tool in the hand training. You can't necessarily learn how a wire tracer sounds without doing a lot of wire tracing in the field.
Yeah, definitely. That leads to the next question. So, what do you think a lot of companies or in your trade of irrigation sometimes they don't want to invest that time to show or train the employees to do that because they find is that losing time or just it's too hard to learn. I mean, you say you're closing the gap, but it's still surprising here in my area. A lot of people is not doing it. What do you think is that they hard find to use the tools?
I think what it is you're right. There is time involved in training these people, and time essentially costs money, right? So whether the training is free or not, you're taking time to train somebody. It may be a lack of having somebody to train. I'm lucky I've had people throughout my years that could mentor me and teach me these skills that they knew, as well as like learning them the hard way just by doing and making mistakes. And I think a good company invests in their employees' training, whether it is wire tracing or hydraulics tracing, or even, whether it is you bring a brand new guy in and he's on a mowing crew and he's never had a weed whip in his hands. Like, yes, you're going to invest the time in that because the guy is going to do it a lot. It's in irrigation. How much time are you investing in troubleshoot training, and how much time is the person going to do the troubleshoot training in the field? Now, I think there's a lot of it out there, and it's totally worth our time to train more people to do this. So, I think it's worth it, but I think there's a drawback of one, people don't have the resources to do it, and two, there is a little bit of apprehension because the cost factor in time and money. Even the tools themselves are quite expensive. if you're not renting it, like one of these wire tracers can cost up to $1,200, $1,400.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, money is a big part of the issue, and the most small companies out there there's trouble with the numbers. So by that means they're gonna be struggling by giving hands-on training and all that. But going back to the beginnings, how do you start as a irrigation tech? Let's say, what do you need from your perspective? You're 20 years ahead, but let's say I
Yeah.
want to start. I want to hear from you. How can I start? Like, what is the basic tools that we need?
Like from the tools other than, your shovels, your wire strippers, your crimpers for poly, your saws, and like your solvent glues and primers for the PVC guys out there. Like obviously those are some of the hand tools that like you see the need. You can't cut PVC without a saw. So if you're doing a lot of PVC, your boss is buying you a saw. And if a sawzall helps you do it faster and it costs $300, how much time is that $300 saving, and how long does it take that tool to pay off for itself? And, something like that is really simple. Whereas you get into like, I'll go from the top down, or well, I'll start with the basics. A simple multimeter. I have this is Armada. Like this is an advanced multimeter, right? I think you
Mm-hmm.
can pick up, that's the Pro 95. It's got the milliamp clamp meter that's specific for two wire systems. It also doubles as a basic multimeter, but your basic $40 to $50 multimeter, volt, some people refer to as a voltmeter, you can pick that up from, your Home Depots or your hardware stores, as well as like you of course can get it from your site ones, your central distributors. They're going to be in that $50 range for a basic voltmeter. It's going to have your AC and your DC volt function to read those, and it's going to have your resistance reading, which is going to read in ohms. If guys don't know what I'm talking about, it's going to be that upside down horseshoe, that omega symbol. That's going to read the resistance of a system, and that getting guys to understand that ohms and the resistance is one of the really important factors. It's going to tell you if connections are possibly bad, if a solenoid is bad, or if everything is in a normal operating range, right? So if you see, oh, that looks normal and everything is working, or it can give you an open. So if you read it's open, you're like, one of the wires is broken somewhere. If multiple zones are open, maybe the common wire is broken somewhere. So getting guys to learn and understand how the multimeter works is one of the big leaps. And I would say that's the first tool you pick up, the basic multimeter. It doesn't have to be expensive. It just has to read, you know, we're putting out that, we're putting out, 24 volt DC from the controller. And then like your direct current or AC, your direct current, like for batteries and stuff, you're going to be able to test batteries, see if they're bad. These are really important. Like that's the important base tool to get. If I were to go from there, I would say the second is the most expensive, or one of the most expensive tools would be the wire tracer. Right? You're not going to be
Yeah.
able to locate valves without that wire tracer. Now, a lot of guys really love the Tempo 521, or sometimes you'll see it called as the Greenlee. Like it's changed names over the years as brands have changed, but that 521 is going to be a staple locator for a lot of guys. Used market, they're probably around $400. I think new, they're probably around six. I myself run the Pro 900. It's going to be somewhere in that $1,200 range new, and it's going to be about 1,000. It's going to be about $1,000 in the used market. There's not a lot of those in the used. You'll see a lot of the Armada 800s and so in the used market, because a guy will buy the 800 and then decide he should have originally spent the extra couple hundred and bought a 900. So you see a lot of 800s in the market used, which you might be able to get a good deal. Um, as well, I've played around with some of the. There's a couple of them on Amazon, like a Vivor. Uh, it's not as powerful, but I have played with them a little bit at like residential homes where the wire runs are not as deep and not as
Mm-hmm.
long. So if you're in a pinch or you're just starting out, maybe you only have $35 to invest in the V-Bore one. Is it going to be as good as the $900 version? Certainly not. But, you know, if you're looking to get your hands on something that could probably help you, you know, and you just can't afford the 900 because you don't know how many times you're going to use $1,000 tool and it's going to take a longer time to pay off. Well, maybe you get the $35 tool, you use it 10 times, and you're like, I really like this, but it's lacking in power that I know that this bigger, better unit has. So now I know I'm using it more often, so I'm gonna go and upgrade to that. Now, obviously, like it's not as robust, and you know, for something in that price range, you know what? Maybe it gets somebody that's just starting out to start doing those instead of just saying like, I don't know what's going on. So there could be an option with that. You you really step up. Then probably the next thing I would get, because it's very inexpensive, would be a low voltage non-contact volt tester. So like electricians will have them a lot. They're the pen with a red tip on the end. You're looking for something
Mm-hmm.
that can go into the 12-volt range. So like some of them are rated down to like 6 or 8 volts. Some of the electrician ones are only going to like 50 volts. So something in the 50-volt range isn't good. But I know, you can get a Milwaukee one. Armada makes one. There's some other brands. Sperry and Fluke, of course, make them. The important thing is to make sure you want it probably 12 volts or less on that, and that will. And I say picking one of those up because it's in the $10 to $20 range. Something in the $10 to $20 range. No, I like it because it's as small as a marker, right? So you can carry this
Yep.
around. You can. I a lot of times have it. You'll see it in the shirt of my collar in the button portion, or you can throw it in your pocket, and it's really small. So it's a low weight, low cost tool that can have a high impact. What that lets you to do is see just at a touch if you're sending voltage from a controller and you have a bunch of wires, single strand is usually the same color. You can start to use it to help identify that stuff. It will, of course, pick up the voltage coming down the line from your tracer. So you can see if your tracer is sending voltage down a wire. It can help do some things like you don't have to take wire nuts off to see if there's voltage there. So it just is a quick tool. It of course can let you like test outlets and stuff too to make sure, sometimes we like, why isn't this controller working? The controller's dead. Well, here there's just a bad outlet, or the GFI on the other side of the garage is. So like a quick testing tool, you're like, the outlet doesn't have voltage. I'm going to start with the outlet and not replace the controller to find out that I don't have voltage there. So something low impact like that, like it's within reach of a lot of guys. It's a handy little tool. I think that's a good one to have. And then I would step into the valve activator. Like Armada also makes the Pro. I want to say the Pro 40 or the Pro 50 and Pro 60. One is the Tech Tool 2, which has some additional features. And Tempo for years has made what they call the Station Master 48, and that'll have a series of 3 lights. It'll say good, bad, and short. Same with the basic Armada one, and now the Armada upgraded one has a digital readout you can use as a digital voltmeter. It's got some extra features in it. For the extra money, I would say go with the 60 or the Tech Tool 2. You know what? I really like the Station Master. It fits in your pocket, though. A lot of guys have used it for years. It also gives you the ability to activate a valve. So where we do blowouts here, you may not have access to a controller, or the wire might be cut in the field and you don't really know. So you can connect it to your common and the zone wire, and you can flip the switch. It runs 2 batteries and it can pop off a zone. So it can run the zone from that box and give it enough voltage. It also can let you test solenoids out in the field where maybe the wiring is bad, but you're unsure if it's the wiring or the solenoid. So you can test the solenoid. You could replace and test a new solenoid right there at the valve. So it gives you some of that functionality. A lot of guys, when they first start out, they rely only on their valve activator instead of that multimeter, because it does have that good, bad, and short, or good, short, and open.
Mm-hmm.
So it's giving you some of that feedback. You got to understand that there's a range that it is, and even though it says good, it might not always be good, and even though it says short, it might still work. But it just means it's on the fringe of one of those acceptable amounts of resistance for it. Also, if you get an activator, you should get the activator set with the probe. They come with a probe, and you can send voltage down the line, and it'll send like a signal down the line similar to what a tracer does, but what that lets you do is I got a bunch of red wires and I got one red wire that's open, but I got 20 opens in the controller and I'm hooking to this red wire open in the field and I'm like, okay, I added a new valve but I'm gonna put my signal down and see where that and I can use it to identify one wire out of a bundle of wires. Sometimes you'll have wires that run into a controller, even multiple multi-strand wires, and you're like, I'm trying to identify which strand goes in which direction, so you can send a tone down and identify it in the controller with that probe. That's a really, really good tool to have. Now, those are probably in the $100 to $300 range for some of those sets. They're well worth it. I use them a lot. The Tech Tool 2 also allows you to send voltage down a two-wire path to use the clamp meter for some of the two-wire troubleshooting, and it allows you to power up a decoder, not have a controller, so you can power up a decoder and read it from a handheld programmer or program it from a handheld programmer in the field. Which once you get to like doing what I'm doing, I'm like, okay, I'm getting all the features I can out of the tools and using all the features that they have that I find useful, right? So there's some
Mm-hmm.
of that I like. I have a shop made tool for troubleshooting two wire systems. When you get the clamp meter and you start to get into the two wire troubleshooting, you should uh, definitely look up. I think I got a video and I call it a hot box. It's basically a transformer paired with a solenoid, but it allows you to send voltage down a two wire path so you can start to use your voltmeter, your clamp meter to diagnose some of the two wire troubles that you would have. So that well as a tool I have, that's a tool I made. No one currently really offers that yet. That Tech Tool 2 does it with batteries, but the tool I have is one you just plug into the wall and it sends voltage down, works on all the two wire systems. Again, you can power some stuff, but you're really limited because you're plugging it in. So I use it, I'll like detach the wires from the controller and use that to power the two wire and do some of that two wire troubleshooting. While we're on two wire, I would say the Armada uh, Pro 400, the TDR. It's a time delay refractometer. What it does is it sends a pulse at a partial speed of light down both wire paths, and depending on how that signal bounces back, any discrepancy on one of those two wires is going to show as a blip on a graph, and it's going to allow you to get a distance on the graph. There are some settings depending on type of insulation, type of wire, thickness, and gauge of the wire. You need to kind of dial in the settings on that, but it can lead you, they say within 3% distance. So you're looking at within 3 feet, over 100 feet. It can help you identify where some of those troubles in the wire, where missing decoders that are buried in valve boxes that are hidden on a system, that TDR can really help you get there. I find sometimes I use the TDR and I say, and if it's something like 290 feet away, that gives me a good distance to say I need to start with my fault finder there. So a fault finder will have like a horseshoe loop. It has two electrodes that go in the dirt, and once you put them in the dirt, it's gonna have a needle on the readout that's gonna bounce towards where the voltage is leaving the wire. So if you have damaged insulation, a wet wire connector that's leaking voltage out to ground, it's gonna show you whether it's right or left, whether it's hitting the right or left probe in the dirt first, and then you kind of just move over until you're right over. And when you're directly over a fault, it doesn't really bounce at all. So okay, great, I'm here, and you dig there, and that can be really effective to find a fault. It can be time consuming, right? And
Yep.
for fault finding, you have to trace first, so you need a tracer and a fault finder if you're going to fault find. some of the more expensive, multi-$1,000, $3,000 or $4,000 tracers also have fault finding units with them. When you get into some of the escapes me, but there's some of the more expensive in the $3,000 to $4,000 range. They'll come with a fault finding loop, and you'll use the actual tracer receiver with the fault finding loop, and they have that capability. I'm trying to think if there's
Great
any other.
information.
The handheld programmers would be the other ones for the Hunter systems. Whether it's easy,
Mm-hmm.
the easy handheld programmer is around like 150 or so. That allows you to program so that one you can put the two wires of the easy decoder in it, and you can set the station number. And then also, while the wire path is electrified either by a hot box or by running the zone somewhere, you can place that at the base of the decoder, and then it'll give you a read and give you a readout, pretty much a health reading of some of the decoders, see if it's working or not. It'll tell you what station number if it's not written on the decoder. The ICD handheld programmer is a giant programmer that's around the $1,000 price tag. That can not only read the decoders, you can program the decoders without taking them off the wire path. The more you start doing and the more Hunter systems you have, obviously the $1,000 price tag starts to diminish. The cost return on investment becomes more the more of these systems you have.
Yeah, I think the hardest part is the initial investment. But like you mentioned, you don't need to go with the expensive stuff yet. I mean, and that's why you find some of those equipment used that you're saying, the small. But I mean, to start is a good point. But if you really want to start it, like you say, there's a multimeter that you can start it, and then just understanding how to use the multimeter, like you say, the ohms and all those things that can tell you a bit if the wire is broken or the solenoid is not
Yeah.
working. So those are the basic, I would say, and you can start with that, and as your career or your knowledge start growing, then you can start investing on more expensive equipment. Also, I believe there is some stores here in my area which they can rent those devices, so it would be easier for you to tackle the first projects while you save some money to buy this. So based on diagnostics, then we're gonna jump into diagnostics. So what will be the first thing to look when a bulb is not turning on? What will you say? What will be, instead of, do we start with the wire tracing right away, or what will be the advice that you give to start defining if I mean, we check the controller is power, but the power bulb is not.
You always start at the controller, right? And so now if you have your multimeter and you're at the controller, you're reading volts, and
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be in the AC range. You're going to read the volts, and you're going to be like, I have uh, 18 to 24 volts is really what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Usually new controllers, they're going to be in that 23, 24 range, putting the power to the field. If you have volts at the controller and nothing's running in the field, you're going to want to turn the controller to off, make sure there's no voltage there, and then you're gonna change that multimeter to ohms, that omega symbol, and you're gonna see what the ohms read on that controller. And typically you're gonna see in the teens to the mid 30s. When you start to see stuff be in the single digits, that's a really low resistance factor. You're likely seeing a bad solenoid or a cross
Mm-hmm.
wire. And then when you start to see really high resistances, that can either be a bad solenoid. When you start to get to the 60s and plus certainly hundreds, I've seen hundreds and 200s. When you start to see 200, that's most likely a bad solenoid. And then like you might see something in the 60s or so, and that's just telling you there's a lot of resistance, and that can possibly be something as simple as a bad wire connection, whereas you're redoing a wire connection, and that's coming back to like the tools. Well, now I have something in the 60s, but I'm bringing my like I have my multimeter, so I could either test it with the multimeter and see what the resistance is at the solenoid with the solenoid disconnected, or I can bring my activator and say, gee, I have it activating right from the valve. I'm going to try to redo these wire connections and then go back to the controller and try to rerun it from the controller.
Great
And
information. Thank
Rainbirds
you.
tend to have a higher resistance rating on the Rainbird DV solenoid as opposed to some of the Hunter solenoids, and then some of the like the Irritrol solenoids. They're going to be somewhere in like the mid 20s usually.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, very good information. So now for the wire tracing, you name many devices. What will be the easiest to start with? Not talking about pricing, but let's say the one you will like a new user struggle the less using it
Yeah.
that you
So
find.
a lot of times it's really going to depend on what the specific issue you're finding and diagnosing, but almost 90% of the time, the first time, like especially if you have a valve that's not working and you can't locate it, you're grabbing your tracer, right? And you're starting with the tracer. I always like to have, I have my tracer wand. I just have an electrical tape to like a, Krylon paint stick that you would use to paint out
Mhm.
edging, because I like to at least dot or spray lines as I'm tracing. So then if I have to go over it again. So a lot of times when you're trying to find a valve, you want your tracer set on low power and low frequency. The digital tracers will have low and high frequency. The high frequency is going to help you trace the wire, but the low frequency is really going to ping or change that tone. It gets super loud when you're over a solenoid. Um, and then there's a normal way of hooking it up where you hook one of the probes to ground and one of them to the common wire or the zone wire you're looking for. And then if you don't find a valve that way, you come back and now your line is painted, and you can go into highlight mode, which is you take your ground clip off the ground stake and you put it on the common wire. So now you're canceling out the radio signal going through both wires. And then the wand is only it's gonna give you nothing until you get directly over valves. So that's just a
Okay.
different way of hooking it up. And that's why you paint the line first, because then you're not having, you most likely don't have signal. Now, if you have it on high power, you might still get some bleed through, but it's going to ping at a valve, or sometimes if one of the wires is broken and you're in highlight mode, you'll just get a signal over the wire, whereas in normal mode, you trace right through. And that tells you, okay, maybe one of my wires is damaged or broken here. And I always say for wire tracing, when it sounds different, like you mark that out on the ground, and maybe that's one of your spots that you're potentially going to start digging. I also say, where you cross things, where wire goes under a sidewalk, it's likely that there's a wire junction at one side or the other. So there could be a buried wire junction with bad wire connectors. You could see you cross edging. Well, maybe somebody that put in edging after the system has already been in, they put in new edging and one of those stakes hit and nicked a wire. You know, aeration cable guy comes in and you're like, oh, there's a new cable line here, or sometimes they dig them in over the winter, and then you're like, okay, now it doesn't work, but I see sort of a trench from here to there. So it's just kind of identifying and using logic to say it crosses here, maybe something happened here, or maybe there's a connection here that's buried that I need to take a look at.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but yeah, I remember when I was using the wire tracer myself. That was the old models back in the like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It was like a little gun with that looked like a PVC thing with a little PVC cap on the top, and you put your headphones. And yeah, definitely paying attention on the noise that you're getting once you're tracing the wire, right? And learning those noises, you can understand it better.
And also, when I train guys, I usually so I'll do a lot of wire tracing, and I a lot of times have, a trainee with me, and I'll say, okay, I'll teach them how to hook up the tracer, and then I say, go get the tracer. We're going to hook up here. I expect them to do that while I'm overworking somewhere else. And I want them to start trying tracing, because sometimes they'll find the valves we're looking for, and that gives them a win. But other times, like I need to come back, and I'll usually have them follow me while I trace for a little bit. And if I find a discrepancy or I hear something funny that like I notice is different, I'll say, "Do you hear how it's here and hear how it's 2 feet away?" And do you hear the difference? And try to give them the training that hands on, because that's something that it's really hard to describe a sound, but it's easy in the field to be like, it sounds way different here and here. We're going to dig right here. And it's easy to go and just give guys that knowledge and make sure that they know what we're hearing and why. Okay, I hear the difference. Okay, I hear that difference too. And that's why we're digging right here. And then, so it's not such a mystery. It's like, oh, he just said dig here and the problem was there. It's actually teaching them what it sounds like, because a lot of it is based on sound, some of it's based on the readout. But if you can really teach a guy what this sounds like, and then eventually they're hooking up the tracer themselves and finding stuff for you or painting the wire path, and you be like, it allows you to also check the work that they did when you're supervising them. And then once they go out in the field, they're not completely lost and say like, "Well, I've seen how to hook one up. I'm gonna try to find it." And you know, if you have trouble, a lot of times you can reach out. Like, I'll help other guys by me if they have trouble. They're like, "I've tried everything. I can't find the stupid valve." I'll go out and trace with them to find it. And I found valves, under patios, under sheds, that they're like, "I would have never found that valve." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's right here." And knowing some of these things that I just do as part of my method, I'm willing to go out and
Yeah,
help find another valve with another guy. And the same thing, like the guys on your own crew or your techs, they can learn those skills, and then they're not so lost when they go out, and they're more effective in the field. And the more that return on investment of buying those tracers really starts to pay off with those guys.
yeah, definitely. When it's good that you send it to do the thing, and then if they have a struggle finding out there, then you take over. But then at the same time, you say the difference. That's a big change on teaching, because a lot of guys out there, they just complain, "Oh, how can you couldn't find it with the technology?" And they just do it themselves instead of teaching. Yeah, that's a big point there, that you just be patient and show the knowledge and tell them the why. And yeah, and it's amazing that you have found valves under decks and everything, because those are very challenging to find. Yeah.
Yeah. And even I've had guys that, like, in my up and coming, I remember one time Charlie Bauman, he's an active member in my Facebook group. Me and my foreman, this was when I was on the install squad, we were doing like a pool repair, a landscaping repair, and we just could not find the valve on this one side. You know, like, I searched for it a little bit, the foreman searched for it for about an hour, and then, you know, within being there, within 5-10 minutes of being there, he's out there and he's like, "Oh, it's right here," and it's in a rock bed next to a retaining wall, like in some bushes, and the cover was covered with rock. But you know, you feel a bit silly when a guy comes out and finds it right away. But one of the things that he would say is to be good at wire tracing, you have to do a lot of wire tracing. And
Yeah,
I've just done
for sure.
more wire tracing than you. So, and it's not like that's an encouragement that really helps, because it's not remembering like I'm better than you or any of that. It's, I've done this a lot more. That's why I make it look easy. As soon as you spend the 1,000 hours in wire tracing, you'll be an expert too.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, time is key and everything. Now talking about wiring, well, this is not part of tracing, but let's say when you're fixing wires or installing wires, how important it is to follow the color code, do you think? And then, because a lot of people just sometimes they don't care about the color. Do you think that clears a conflict, or just it's preference?
This is a good one, because I'm posting about this and got a lot of pushback. Um, a lot of guys will think that wiring based on alphabetical or wiring based on the rainbow, or they have just some random willy-nilly wire going. And to what I say is, like, I understand that that works for some people, but why? And don't really get reason why the wiring pattern is the way it is. I have a wiring pattern, and it simply starts with red, blue, and green. When you get two wire, it's red and white. White you're using as the common, red is the first wire. So if you were wiring just one valve, like you start with red from the farthest from the controller in the wire path. Like the farthest wiring out there starts as red, blue, green, and then you go to yellow because yellow's on 5 strand, black and brown on 7 strand. It depends on what brand. So now, if you said I have a different wiring order than you because I use a different brand and this is the way, but we're basically stepping down the wire in color as they appear, as you go from 5 to 7 to 10 to 13. We're adding those colors in as we go. And then if you start over on another strand, you're running maybe multiple strands, or you have, say, a controller has two 13 strands that run out from the controller and go in different directions. Now I'm starting from the other end of the main line and I'm doing the same order back to the controller. And maybe I have, a set of valves right outside where the wire comes on. And I've done a lot of commercial installs and that's where it comes from. And it's like, well, I only do houses and I only do 13 strands, so that works for me. That's great. What we are trying to avoid, though, is cross color connections because when you're connecting red to orange and yellow to pink somewhere, and pink at the controller is not pink at the valve, that's when you have a problem and that's when things get confusing. Um, no, sometimes you do have to monkey mingle the wiring when you're in there to do a repair because maybe yellow on this strand doesn't work from here to there, and you're connecting it to one color to the other. But ideally, on a new install, you're connecting one color at the controller, goes all the way out to that valve in the field, and it doesn't switch, and it goes all the way back to the controller. And you think on large commercial buildings, when you're stepping down, when you're running hundreds of feet of wire, you could save maybe $2,000 by stepping down on wire by not having 13 wire run all the way to the very last valve. Say you have 300 feet from a set of valves, and then you have two valves down there, and 5 strand is sufficient to run out there. And now the difference in 5 strand between 13 strand per foot is probably something like, just off the top of my head, it's 50, 60 cents difference per foot. So that's a significant amount of savings. And that's why it really matters in the commercial world, is because we're doing this to cost save. Now, if you think you want to run 13 strand to every valve on every property, more power to you. Like, certainly don't listen to me if that's your system, that's fine. Where I run into it is I see like guys will do alphabetical and they start at the box nearest to the controller, and then they're like, but this is out here, and like I said, you got pink to yellow and gray to green, and you're like, I don't really know what's at the controller. And then a lot of times I run into some of this stuff and I say, I'm just rewiring everything to my wiring pattern because that's what makes sense to me. Now, the crew, whatever you're doing, your crew and company level should use the same pattern, right? Because I
Yeah.
should be able to install the controller and have my crew wire valves and say, I know this is a 7-zone system. I got my red, blue, green, yellow, black, and brown. I know I put this in that order, and that's how it goes. And maybe you are switching black and brown in the controller because those two valves got wire, but that's less of a deal than just not having any glue or any system, but it allows you to move very quickly and do everything repeatable. And then it allows, hey, my service guys are coming out and they know, okay, they know my wiring pattern. So they have red and blue here, and then they have yellow over here at this valve, and they know there's a green somewhere in between that they're missing. So without going to the controller and trying to, like, they inherently know because the pattern wise, and this is a system you installed, like there's something missing in between here. It takes out a lot of the guesswork, right? And standardizes stuff.
Yes.
I'm a I'm a big promoter of standardizing it all between even companies. Although some people are resistant to change the way that they do things, and it works for them.
Yes. Yeah. That's a big thing right there. You touch. Some companies, they don't want to follow a system, and they just go, just patch it, put any color, or just do whatever. Just do you, like you said, they mix colors. They think they're simplifying their life by just doing the work and move on. But then the problem comes when someone else come in and say, "What are you gonna do?" Now we have to figure it out and try to read their mind what they did. So yeah, it works both ways. Like they're gonna save time if they ever return, because what happened when the employee left too, and another one come and say, "Oh, this mess is worth." So yeah, I've been seeing that too. So I will say one of the key factor of being wire tracing is start with, when you're laying wire, laying with a pattern. Like you say, you have your pattern. I have my pattern too. I don't like to mix colors.
I remember too, I was early in my career. That just reminds me, like there was an install guy that worked for one of the companies that I worked with, and he was colorblind. So like, and his method was like he would just start doing wires until they worked. But it was funny because like some of the wires were completely fine, but the like blue and green would blue and green could be interchanged, right? And then
Yeah, yeah,
gray, black, and brown. Like those were a roll of the dice. Which three of those colors went all the way? But orange was always orange, and yellow was always yellow, and pink was always pink. But those like ones were always a crapshoot of what was out there because he was colorblind and he just kind of played with the wires until he got them to work. I mean, if it was me in that scenario, I might have thought, "Hey, man, maybe I have the other guy that's not colorblind wire the system up." But you know what? That's what he was doing, and that's it's interesting when you get on systems like that, and like I said, it can be challenging, and sometimes the best route is to just start rewiring things from one point to another, especially when it's like residential homes that it's just a couple of boxes. I had to
yeah,
rewire whole commercial systems just because I didn't have what I needed working. And that was to me just determined like it's going to go fastest if I just start rewiring from this point back to the control.
for sure. Yeah. So that is definitely a key. So yeah, I think one of the key issues again is naming color, marking, and connections cohesive, so everything can be diagnosed faster, and everybody will save time. But the problem that I see on the industry, there is no code to follow. Like electricians, they have a code where they can use
Right.
certain wires. We don't, so that's why anybody with a little bit of knowledge, they go to Home Depot or any box store, they grab a roll of multi wires, and they just gonna run. They even put color on common, like orange, red, whatever.
Yeah, sometimes you'll see red, sometimes you'll see green. I know our Australian friends, I think they're a real fan of using green as the common.
So yeah, again, it's just, I guess a lot of people take their preference on top of the standards, and that's where it's a little bit of confusion. I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong, you're like that, but you create a conflict on the industry by now just wanting to follow one simple standard. I won't say rule,
Right.
because, but it's just to make everything easy for everybody, not just you.
Oh yeah, it's so much easier when the company uses one wiring pattern. That was one thing that was like pounded into us differently when I worked at the first company I worked at. And everybody wired the same, although like there were a couple guys like one of the guys instead of yellow it would like orange came before yellow for him. Like orange and yellow were flip
Hmm.
flops. So like if I open a controller and I see orange was in that position, I'd say, "Oh, Dave wired this controller. This is one of the systems he installed." And Sean would install it differently. Sean would have yellow before orange, which isn't a huge deal, but it also can tell you like, "Oh, I know this guy installed it. This guy wired it this way." I mean, different guys will you get really into it, and you're like, "This guy at this company, he puts in his wire nuts this way and twists them this way, which is different than the guy that
Yeah,
twists them this way that works for us." And you know, it can help you identify like without looking at the paperwork who put in the system, give you some ideas like. But yeah, it is nice to have it standardized company wide and standardized for like a long length of time. And like I said, guys are resistant to change because you can imagine if I did Roy G. Biv and everything was red, orange, yellow, and now I'm trying to go red, blue, green. everything moving forward. Now it causes confusion. I can see how people don't want to switch because it would
Yeah, yeah,
be confusing in the aspect. But like I said, but then imagine being in a position like I've been in a position. I went to a company and I got one guy that's doing Roy G. Biv, one guy that is one guy that is certainly one guy that's doing alphabetical order, and I'm like, oh gosh, it's alphabetical. I gotta think. What? Okay, now I'm thinking gray comes before green, and I'm like, but gray doesn't show up until 13 strand, and we got 10 strands, so green comes first, and like it becomes a
yeah, yeah.
mess. Sometimes very quickly when everybody's doing their own thing and no one's willing to just jump on and standardize.
Yes, I think that's the way I see it. Right? I might be wrong, but I think that's why the two-wire system came along because the brands were finding out, oh, it's a mess with the wire. Let's just simplify it to two wires. But even though that, I see a lot of issues with the two wires too. People don't want to just standardize things, I guess.
Yeah, two-wire systems, they're certainly different, and they are a different tool set. Like you still have, now you're getting into the advanced multimeter, but you still want a wire tracer. You can still use a fault finder.
I think my internet is kind of slow. I don't really hear you anything. I see you moving, but I don't hear you. Do you hear me right? Absolutely. Mm. Yeah, I guess my Wi-Fi is slow. Something happened. I can. I see you moving, but
So I was just going to say, I'll go through some of the two-wire troubleshooting process. So when I a lot of stuff not working, I'm putting voltage with the hot box to the zone lines, and then you're using your clamp meter to read milliamp readings along that path. Your clamp meter, you want a clamp meter that's going to have the true RMS and have milliamp readings. You can get one from Fluke, you can get one from Sperry, you can get one from Armada. Like you got the Pro 95 here, and then you're putting the clamp around one single wire and everything's going to add together. So if you clamp at the controller and you see you have 300 and you have 300 field decoders, that's working correctly because everything's going to be in that like 2 to 3 milliamp range per station. Sometimes like a multi-station decoder is, a two-station might be at that 5 to 6 milliamp range for a two-station decoder, while a single station is going to be like 2 or 3 if it's working correctly. Sometimes you'll see them working in the 6, 7 range, but that's kind of giving you the hint that like maybe this decoder is damaged, maybe the connection isn't good, um, maybe something's going on and this decoder is not quite failed yet, but it could be failing. Especially if I see a lot of these like after storms, I get lightning strike ones, and I'm like, okay, this decoder is reading 8, but it works, but this decoder is working 7 and it's not. So just knowing what the optimum range is supposed to be. So if you connect to one lead of the decoder and it says 3, but it says 9 after, and the decoder says 3, then it should say 6 after the decoder. So it's just going along the legs, doing a little math, looking for the one that is out of spec. You get decoders in the 20s and stuff. Certainly, that's the issue. A lot of times, if it's a 100 system, I'm grabbing my handheld programmer to see if that handheld programmer will read the decoder, work with the decoder. And, if it can't connect, then, and it's still got milliamps, then, that's a signal that that decoder is bad. Maybe the connection is bad. Some of the controllers, the Rainbird controller has that fault mode built in, so you can put it in fault mode instead of using the hot box. It will actually go into fault mode if it reads really high milliamp readings. So it just automatically goes in that mode, won't run anything, so nothing gets damaged, but allows you to use your clamp meter to start identifying those problems with it. And sometimes it's just the decoder, sometimes it's connections. Everything is really, when you see connections, I've seen a lot of systems that have just bad connections in general. Wire strippers, again, is a $20 tool. A good pair of wire strippers is really important because guys sometimes will nick wires with just cheap wire strippers, old crummy wire strippers, and not twist the wire nuts on. Of course, on two wire, I'll tell you everything should be DB wise. Now they say on the newer systems, like the easy decoders, DB wise aren't necessary. Well, I'm saying they aren't necessary. They are certainly going to help the cause and longevity of that system last, right? It's kind of saying like, could you put shingles on a roof without tar paper underneath? Yes. Is it going to last? It could. Is it going to last as long as both of those layers of protection? No. Of course you want both layers of protection. So, that DBY, you just think of it as that double layer upon that greased wire nut and then adding that grease cap over the top. I just seen it was, I can't remember if it was, no, I don't think it was Page. It was Regency just made a new gel filled pack like that where the wire nut, instead of being pushed in from the bottom and the flare portion sits at the bottom of the grease, it actually like goes in a box and turns up. So you're putting the grease on top of the wire nut, so it's faced in the opposite direction to kind of get more of that grease to cover the actual component itself, where like the wire comes in and the wire nut kind of does this J shape, so the wire nut sits at the base of the J, and then the top of the opening is up here. So it's just everything we can to stop wire from getting into that wire connection. I've seen systems that somebody wipes sweat off their hand and twist the wires together. Now you're putting salt and moisture
Yeah,
inside that DBY when you're putting it on. So sometimes guys are wiring these up in the rain, and that happens. But you need to realize I'm now putting rain and moisture into that grease fitting. So actually, water is trapped in there, and corrosion still can take place. Um, with the way like the constant voltage run through some of the two wire pass systems, like the corrosion actually when there's moisture and exposure to the elements, say you just put a wire nut on and threw it in the dirt, well that you're actually encouraging that process through electrolysis because there's voltage running through that wire, so it's just increasing the corrosion and making it happen fast.
yeah, definitely. Big, big, big one right there. Yes, moisture is a big one right there, and a lot of guys who are doing the splices there, they don't take that little task like you say, swapping your sweat or doing during the rain. So that sounds like nothing, but yeah, with the time that moisture is trapped there, it cannot go out. So technically, it's been in moisture all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
So
even the length of wire is really, it gets to be really important on two wire systems. I mean, it should be any system. You should have enough wire to pull out of the valve box on the ground and to pull up to your knee, which is most men, that's, about 18 inches of wire. Some guys will say longer. I'll say you can always cut wire off. You can never add wire to the length of wire without putting another connection in there. So we want long enough wires, at least 12 to 18 inches that you're able to take out of the box to redo a wire connection if you have to, and then being careful and using the right tools. Now, Tempo just came out with the Maxi Jacket stripper. on the side of their new wire strippers. So when you're taking that exterior jacket off, you're not going to nick the interior jacket or damage the wire that way. Same thing when you're using a nice wire strippers that's sharp and the right size hole, you're stripping the wire off and you're not denting that copper conductor on the inside. So you don't want to dent the jacket and you don't want to damage the connector because the connector could snap inside a wire nut. I've had one system must have been 4 years old and we had to dig and I said, okay, it tees here and we're not getting anything after this tee. When we dig it up, well, here at, it had been a weak point because somebody probably used crimpers to strip the wire and that dent in that wire took 4 years to snap. And then there was another one that was nicked on that system on the interior jacket and it took 4 years to corrode all the way through that wire to where it wasn't connected and then cause problems with all the zones after that. So these little errors can like cause a lot of troubleshooting time on the site. Now, when you're losing 20 zones, it's probably not cost effective to throw in 20 nodes, but you'll start seeing guys like, I don't know how to do this. We only have 2 zones. Okay, a 2 station node is only $250. Instead of being here for 10 hours, we're just going to put that in. And then that's just going to run these zones. And then it gets forgotten. Nobody knows about it. It's at the end of the main line. A new company takes it over and they're like, yeah, we've never seen irrigation there. We don't think there's anything there. But all the time it's watering off this node. But then when you go to blow it out, it never gets blown out and then it gets damaged. So, it
Yeah.
freezes and then it's a whole fiasco. And it's like, instead of going through and fixing this, and now I know I'm not saying wireless valves. There's a couple wireless valves. There's the Thrive that has it. This valve now. I see those as like another band-aid. Now, sometimes they're probably necessary. You could run a whole system on wireless valves. I've definitely seen a system that was installed with no wiring, and I thought to myself, like, how am I going to fix this? Okay, wireless valves are probably the best option for these 6 zones on this apartment building instead of, needing to do bore shots that are going to cost thousands of dollars. But it's
Yeah.
another route where people are going to say, okay, I'm going to charge them $500 throwing wireless valves for these 2 zones in this island because I don't want to dig up to the sleeve and try to fix the wiring that's here, or I don't know how to fix the wiring here. So I'm just going to say, I think it can be an easy out, and that can be a trap to some people. Just like the nodes, I think they're very overused because I think it's a trap because people think this is the easy way to fix it, where instead of fixing it, you're really just putting a band-aid on it and causing more issues down the line for the next guy to fix.
Definitely, that's a good one right there. A lot of people just use the knob or the wireless valve just to patch that section that you said. In
Yeah.
reality, you're not gonna be there forever. So if you say they switch companies or another management came in and bought the building and everything changed. Now the next company is gonna be suffering because, like you say, they don't know there's a knob all the way at the end of the main line, and they think they just valves run into the controller, and they keep forgot they got buried, and then later on they blew up because they were not they froze and things like that. Or even here in California, which is not cold as there, but it just got forgot, got buried, and then all of a sudden pipe breaks, and that's when you find out that there was a valve there or it start leaking. But
And
yeah,
add
definitely,
zones and doublers would definitely fit in that category, and they cause like a whole different set of issues because like the way a doubler or a add a zone works is like zone one will run, but that same wire is shared by multiple zones that go to the doubler and then go out to the field. So like a doubler somewhere in the field and it like a lot of times it's used to add a valve. Well, if that doubler fails, there's still a zone that runs for those 2 zones that are looped into the controller. Like, okay, I see sprinklers run. Well, that's weird. Those same sprinklers ran over here. And
yeah,
it's weird. Like that zone runs and then that doesn't. it doesn't work well with smart controllers that are doing some of their own watering schedule, because if you're doing cycle and soak, well, maybe this zone runs and it intends to run, maybe zone one runs and then it intends to run zone three, which is the zone next to it. But then maybe zone one runs and zone two runs and then it's trying to run zone one again, but it runs zone three because the doublers, like, it causes some unique challenges where it's like the understanding is they are there because sometimes like that is the easiest way to add a second valve next to another valve. It can share that same wire path. It can be effective, and same thing with nodes. They can be effective in the short term. They certainly can be a temporary thing. I always look at nodes as a temporary, like, we got new
Yeah.
plants in. This system doesn't work. They didn't check it out first, and now they realize it doesn't work. Well, we're going to put in a temporary controller. We're still going to charge the customer, and then we're going to charge them to come back and fix the wiring and take the node out, or we're charging a cost to them to have the node in their property as a rental, and then we're just, I got three zones sitting at the shop, and it's like, yeah, I can put one in. Sometimes you do new construction, there's no power yet, but they put in all the plants and drip lines, and you just need two zones to run the drip line stuff. And you say, I'm going to come back and wire these to the controllers. Like, they're great for that temporary application. There's just some unique challenges seen by some of these, like, would you call it shortcuts to do? Yeah, but I mean, certainly they're there. They're not going away, but I've walked onto properties that have had almost 20 nodes on them, and it was a pain to get through to the wiring and fix. I remember one, and I hooked up my tracer and I start tracing, and here there was one controller about 20 feet away from the valve that they had on the wall that it was just in the off position, and I'm like, they didn't attempt to trace this, because if they would have then led to that controller 20 feet away right here that just runs a single zone. They didn't attempt it,
Yeah.
but they dug up the valve and replaced a Rainbird valve with 100 valves so they could put a node on it. And I thought to myself, think of the extra work they made from themselves when they could have took 5 minutes, hooked up a wire tracer, found the controller, and said, "Oh, that's weird that there's a second controller there." And then I actually found a third controller on that site. And that's another thing, just labeling commercial controllers. Like, it takes you nothing to carry around a Sharpie. And if I got more than one controller on site, I'm labeling this controller one of three. This one is two of three. This one is three of three. So if a guy finds one of three and three of three, he knows he's missing two of three. Like, the note on the controller says it is. I don't have a map, but like writing these little notes down, and it seems so simple to just to carry a Sharpie to write notes. Or I have one that they had temporary irrigation to establish wildflowers on a hillside, but now all that irrigation is broken and taken out. So, I wrote 12, 13, and 14 need to be blown out, but they run the hillside of wild plants no longer used. So when a guy goes and opens the controller for blowout, he sees, I need to blow out 12, 13, and 14. But when I'm doing startup, I need to make sure they don't have any time on them, so the water isn't just being wasted away, poured out of some broken pipe on this hillside. Something as simple as a Sharpie marker, which costs 95 cents, can be a great tool. It helps the next guy. It helps yourself when you come out to it. It helps the next guy at your company, and it helps the next company that comes in on a site. Now, I know there's probably guys that like say, they have no interest in helping somebody if they lose a property, but to what it is, it's like we're all in this community. I don't see a reason to put notes and have a system suffer when you could just leave a note on a controller and it's easy as that. The amount of times I've just been saved by some guy that drew a Sharpie map on a boiler room wall, and you're like, this is where the valve box is. And it might not be accurate, it might not be to scale, but at least it gives you something to work off of instead of having to look at the whole system and trace the whole system. You're like, okay, I did find this valve box that's on here for zone 6. Like 7 and 8 is what I'm looking for. They should be in this area. So the amount of times I've been helped by the guy before me, I feel like I owe it to the guy after me to help him as much as I can. And leaving notes, and certainly no maintenance guy ever cares if you write on a boiler room wall, or most of them don't. And on the inside of controllers, even residential homes, no homeowner even notices that I write things on the backside of the faceplates. Or I'll tell them, like, I'm leaving this for the next irrigation guy that's here on the inside. Usually, when they're troubleshooting, they'll open the faceplate, and if there's a note there in Sharpie, you're going to read it.
Those are part of like the topic we were talking about with the wires, standardized colors. Same thing with here. We're surprised. I had visit many sites too that they don't even have a color map or any note. Like you say, it's as simple as getting a piece of paper, draw something there. If you don't want to draw like an art piece, no, just a square where and mark kind of where the controllers are, sometimes where the bulbs are. I mean, the more detailed, the better for everybody. But I guess, like you said, some people don't pay attention or don't care about that, and they just forget it or take it for granted and then just go. And I'd be surprised that a lot of people say, it's another guy's problem. I'm gonna get paid and I walk away from here. And I don't think there's a reason to be in business. Many people work that way. But I encourage my guys to leave as much information as possible for the next guy. So that guy easier. And also it will definitely notice, oh, this company start coming here. You'll be surprised that they can even recommend you, even though they're from another company, or they might want to come work for you too. So
Yeah, I know.
it's a big.
I definitely saw a guy that worked for a company I used to work at a gas station. I was asking about another guy that still works there, and he's like, no, and he's like, and I like introduce myself. I'm like, I'm Tom Glenn, and he's like, oh, you're Tom Glenn. I see your name all over the notes that I look at, and thinking that like these digital systems, like taking some of these notes that last a very long time, if not forever, like within a company system, to give the next guy down the road something to jump off is very helpful in a company. A lot of times on blowouts, if there's a spigot back at a garden, I'm writing that because I know I myself had a blowout and looking inside the controller where I might not see a spigot behind the shed, that waters the garden, but that needs to get blown out. And you got to think about it. If I don't put a note in that controller, then the guy that blows it out isn't going to see it, or is likely not to see it, or maybe he will see it. But if I put a note in there, he's going to go looking for it, and that's going to prevent damage to happen from the customer system. And then they're not going to be mad on startup when something is frozen because it wasn't blown out correctly, because it gets blown out correctly. Like that kind of thing can help prevent time down the road, and it can help prevent damage that your customer is going to be upset about. I mean, obviously, it's like, oh, you blew up my system. I don't understand why I have to pay all this money because this is frozen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So those little details, it sounds little, but like you said, if it's noted, then your customer is not gonna be having a big expense because they was not you, or the next guy didn't find it. You already leave the note. So yeah, definitely people notice and seeing those notes and getting those feedback is rewarding. Yeah, we start doing it too, and yeah, it feels nice and amazing that the communities, if it's benefit by your actions, that are little, but like you said, a Sharpie costs 95 cents on the store.
Oh yeah, and I've even reached out, like digital CRMs are so nice because they're holding all their information off past history and everything, and even maps. And I've reached out to, like, I know my buddy that's managing at another company. His company installed this system, and I said, hey, they came in and put in drain tile and wrecked this whole section. Do you have the as built for this? And you know what? He happily sent me the as built. I think it's a great professional courtesy for somebody to do that. And he didn't have to. He could have said, "Kick rocks, like figure it out." But that as build saved me time down the road. And then, but I also know, like, I have the professional courtesy that when he asks me something that I can help him out with, like, certainly I'm willing to help him out too. And there's a reciprocity that comes back to some of it.
Oh, for sure, yeah, it's a two-way road. So yeah, and then having all those CRMs and everything. But hopefully this coming and a standard too for everybody. Well, this is a great
Yeah,
learning
can we
experience.
wrap?
Tom,
I don't want to cut
yeah.
it.
This is a great. No. I understand time, and so yeah, this is a great learning from wire tracing and irrigation setups. Thank you, Tom Glenn, for your time, and just remind everybody where you at so they can reach out to you if they ever need help, and we'll
Yeah,
be in touch.
as always, Apollo, it's a pleasure to be on and like have a great platform. I really like what you're doing. You know, bringing other people on to just have the ideas shared with others so that we can all learn and grow. Irrigation related, I have the irrigation and sprinkler system tech talk page on Facebook. I'm irrigation tech talk on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. I'm Tom Glenn on Facebook. Again, I work for Creekside. We're out of the Minnesota Twin Cities area. So if you have hands on, gone as far as Rochester and St. Cloud. I've actually gone to Iowa to help somebody out, and I was the closest guy willing to give them help on a two-wire system. And it's just there are other guys out there. There's certainly other guys that are on the professional level like me in the irrigation and sprinkler system tech talk page that I see guys all the time say, "Hey, I'm here in Texas and I need help working on this system. I really can't figure it out." And somebody be like, "I'm over here, they're next to you over 15, 20 minutes, but there's certainly guys in the community that are willing to help others out, whether it's sharing ideas. I just sent a guy flat rate pricing template and I said, take it, modify it, use it, and make it yours. But not only sharing the training, the hands-on experience and being willing to help somebody else out, but also sharing the ideas like you're doing here with your platform to to help us all be better.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for the time. It was amazing,
Thanks,
and
Apollo.
glad to have you back. All right. Bye-bye.